Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this panel to introduce the International Federation of Horse Racing Authorities Minimum Horse Welfare Standards. My name is Louis Romanet, Chairman of the IFHA, and I'm very proud of this document produced by our Horse Welfare Committee. The standards serve as guidance on the care and welfare of horses at different times of their life and complement recent reforms which will ensure the traceability of horses from their foal stage through into retirement and beyond. The IFHA affirms the central role of the horse in racing and accordingly regard the health and welfare of racehorses in all stages of life to be fundamentally important to the viability and sustainability of the industry. Racing authorities should refer to this document to establish accepted horse welfare practices in their jurisdiction and to set minimum standards, including behavioral change where necessary. To review the IFHA minimum horse welfare standards, including its origin and purpose, we are proud to present an esteemed panel of experts. The first one is Jamie Stier, Executive General Manager of Integrity Services for Racing Victoria, who is the current chairman of the IFHA Horse Welfare Committee, a role he was appointed to in 2015. With 35 years in the racing industry, Jamie has split his career between Australia, Hong Kong, and Great Britain, and is among the most widely respected regulatory executive in our sport around the world. The second expert is Professor David Mellor, who alongside New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing developed thoroughbred welfare assessment guidelines, for which section of the IFHA minimum horse welfare standards are drawn from. To date, he has been an active researcher and scholar in fundamental and applied animal-based science for 55 years, beginning in Australia in 1965. In Edinburgh, Scotland, over a 21-year period, he established and then led the Perinatal Studies Group at the Modern Research Institute. Subsequently, in New Zealand, during 30 years as a professor at Massey University, he led the introduction and consolidation of animal welfare science within the School of Veterinary Science. Then in 1998, he instigated the establishment of the Animal Welfare Science and Biotechnics Center, becoming its foundation director. Our third panel participant, Dr. Lynn Hillyer, Chief Veterinary Officer and Head of Anti-Doping for the Irish Horseracing Regulatory Board. Dr. Hillyer joined this board in 2016 after previously serving as Veterinary Advisor for the British Horseracing Authority from 2005 through 2016. Dr. Hillyer has been an internationally recognized equine regulatory veterinarian for over a decade and was elected by her peers in 2018 as chairman of the International Group of Specialist Racing Veterinarians. She is a member of the IFHA's Advisory Council on Prohibited Substances and Practices, of the International Movement of Horses Committee, and of the Horse Welfare Committee. Leading the panel as moderator is esteemed British presenter Rishi Persad. To conclude, we thank you for your attention and hope that you find this conversation informative and useful. You will find the document presenting the IFHA minimum horse welfare standards on our website. Thank you for your attention.
Hello everyone, thank you very much to Professor David Mellor, Lynn Hillyer and Jamie Stier for joining us to talk about horse welfare standards, which, as many of you will know, in the international racing jurisdictions around the world, it is becoming more and more of an important topic of conversation, and people are certainly acting upon it with far more urgency than we perhaps witnessed decades ago, which is great. Jamie, I'm going to start with you to perhaps provide some background as to the genesis of the IFHA Minimum Horse Welfare Standards document and what is hoped to be achieved by its adoption by the IFHA.
Thanks, Rishi. For several years now, the IFHA, along with all racing jurisdictions and racing people, I think, have been really conscious of horse welfare and the important role it plays in our sport. And the IFHA Exco tasked us, the Horse Welfare Committee, with developing a global set of minimum standards, a document that could be easily understood by all people, a document that puts together the principles of good welfare. It doesn't tell people what they must do, but it sets out what is the minimum standards to provide a horse with a good life, a happy life, which is very important, and having a healthy horse. So we've developed a set of standards relying heavily on the work of Professor Mellor, together with the New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing, to adopt a set of standards that we think are easily understood by all the racing jurisdictions, and if adopted, of course, they'll lead to a much better environment for the horse. But I do emphasise that they're minimum standards. Of course, being conscious of the different resourcing models around the world, we'd encourage each jurisdiction to try and go above and beyond the minimum standards as best as they're able to. But if they deliver what is set out clearly in this document, we believe that horse racing globally will be able to put its hand on its heart and say, we actually do provide proper, good and appropriate care for our horses.
David, and then I'm going to bring you in on this because obviously I can see you nodding away in acknowledgement that this is an important.
My heart.
Exactly. So if you'd like to expand on why it's music to your heart.
Okay. Well, I started working with the New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing, it must be nearly 2.5 years ago, especially with Martin Burns. And they already had been working towards welfare standards for horses through a particular national committee we have here. Marty sent me a copy of a strategy document for animal welfare, and that got us talking. And he realized that he wanted to have a lot more on the 5 domains model, which we'll talk about in a moment, as a way of framing the document and the standards. And basically what we did was we used the 5 domains model to examine in detail what the thoroughbred sector was doing right about animal welfare. And that was the starting point. Now you'll understand that you can't actually talk about what you're doing right without bringing in at some stage what you're not happy about or what is not so good. And you will see that you will have seen that the New Zealand document is framed, first of all, in how you would have the circumstances in which you'll have good welfare. And beside that, it says, and a horse that looks or is in these particular circumstances is not likely to have welfare at a standard that you'd want, and you need to take remedial action.
Understandably so, of course. Lynn, just to get your reaction to what Jamie said originally, and the fact that there is now this document for everyone to refer to.
Yeah, I think coming from a veterinary point of view, perhaps not surprisingly, we're delighted, particularly coming from a racing regulatory veterinary view. We are just thrilled with this. It builds on the work that the IGSRV put together, the international group of specialist racing veterinarians put together some years ago, but has put on a gear, which is what we need now. I suppose I ought to explain. We're a group of vets and others with an increasing membership now, up to about 170, who are very passionate about this area. We have a certain number of experts who work alongside us. Professor Mellor would be a good example. But basically, we're vets employed by racing regulatory authorities. Our commitment is to safeguarding and improving horse and actually greyhound health, welfare, and safety. So yeah, it's music to our ears too.
Right. Sorry.
Well, David, let me pick you up on what you're saying, because it'd be great for you to outline what is meant by horse welfare, and particularly what you think would constitute good horse welfare.
Okay. The 5 domains are, as you will have seen from the document, but nutrition, environment, health, and behaviour are the first 4, and then mental state or affective state. Now, affect is just a generic term meaning all subjective experiences, emotions, feelings, and other things like that. Generically, you just call them affects or affective state. The first three, nutrition, environment, and health, are about survival. You get that right, you'll keep the animal alive. But it won't necessarily have a good welfare state, because it might be in circumstances that restrict its opportunities to engage in behaviors that it finds rewarding. Survival critical, get the nutrition, the physical environment, and the health right, and the animals will stay alive. And associated with them can be some positive experiences. The behavior side refers to the animal's perception of its external environment, and the evidence of that is the way it is behaving in the environment that it's in. Now, the thing about the first three is that when you've got thirst, there is no positive to thirst. It is simply not being thirsty. Same with breathlessness, and the same with hunger, and the same with pain. So there may be the relief of not having those negative experiences, but generally speaking, you go from negative to neutral with those. There can be positives associated with that, and that is quenching pleasures of drinking water, for example. Okay, so where you get the positive welfare is in where it's handled in the 5 domains model, is in the behavior. In the behavior area. And with that, you can go from negative experiences demonstrated by the behavior to positive experiences. So the main areas that you will manage to give animals positives is through the way you manipulate the environment, or the environments you put them in that give them positive experiences. Now, the objective of animal welfare management is minimizing the negative experiences that are obligatory and you'll never get rid of, but keeping them within tolerably low levels. Emphasis on tolerably low levels. I mean, I'm slightly thirsty at the moment, but it's not compromising my welfare. So that's the sort of thing. But if I hadn't had any water at all day, I'd be pretty thirsty. And I'd drink the water. It'd be nice to drink the water, and it would correct the dehydration that's leading to my thirst, and the thirst would go away. So the objectives are minimizing the negative experiences in the survival critical area, but also in the behavioral area. And in the behavioral area, giving animals opportunities to engage in behaviors that they find rewarding or pleasant or enjoyable. And there are many of those. So they are the broad objectives. And the 5 domains model is modeled along that understanding. And it's the way we use it as a device. It's a facilitatory device to assess animal welfare, and having assessed it and worked out what needs to be done for any corrections, or what you want to continue doing because of the good things you're already doing, you use the model to give you guidance on what to do in those circumstances. The first 4 domains provide you with objective evidence. People get worried when you're talking about subjective experiences. You know, this is a no-no. This is anthropomorphism. Well, that's a relic of the past now, because we have enough neurophysiological knowledge in relation to the generation of these experiences that we can be confident that when we know what the circumstances are in the animal and outside the animal, that we can cautiously, but with some confidence, say what the experiences are. First 4 domains give you the objective evidence. And what you do is you use that objective evidence to work out what the subjective experiences, the affects are that the animal is likely to be experiencing. You manage the objective evidence by all the sort of husbandry stuff and medical stuff and design of buildings and so on. So it's not a matter of a subjective thing. The motivation to do it right is understanding what the experiences are. The way you do it is by standard, some often modified practices of husbandry, building design, veterinary treatment, and behavioural opportunities that you create and give the animals opportunities to enjoy.
David, absolutely fascinating. And Jamie, just picking up on David's eloquent description of the 5 models, how important do you think it is that the public around the world, in all racing jurisdictions and all horse jurisdictions that have a significant influence in the industry, how important is it that they are aware of the parameters in which we're trying to create the document, trying to create a better welfare for the horses, given what David has said?
Look, that's imperative, and I think nowadays, so many discussions within all horse sports, but particularly racing, tend towards welfare, and what encourages me listening to David is the positivity. It's a positive message that we're giving, and I think that's something that racing hasn't necessarily been good at over the years. Is we've talked a good game, we've said that we provide great welfare for our horses, but we haven't actually been able to display it. And through the adoption of David's 5 domains, along with the work of Lynn's team, the international veterinarians, we think if the basics that are contained within this document will create that platform that people will be on a global basis be able to speak positively. But I think the other thing that when people are talking about positives of good horse welfare, there's without doubt all the positives to the horse themselves, but from the people, and you mentioned the people, Rishi, the people, they themselves will experience positivity out of having a well cared for and appropriately cared for horse. But also within the racing context, it'll provide positive performance. It'll maximise and optimise performance. So there's just so many positives that it's very difficult, I would think, for anyone to say that this is not an appropriate step forward in the manner in which we care and provide for our horses.
Lynn, I'm going to ask you very shortly a little bit more about the group that you're chair of, the group of specialist racing veterinarians. But I just wanted to ask you what you're thinking about David and what we've just been hearing from David and Jamie, and just the sort of innate understanding or feeling that it's right, it's the right way to go about it.
My grounding was in the 5 freedoms. And one of the reasons I became a racing regulatory vet, I'm not from a racing background particularly, but I came into it because I was passionate about the horses. I got bitten by them in my 3rd year, and around the same time as, not literally been bitten by the bug, at the same time as John was talking about the 5 freedoms. And the big difference we see now, talking about whether it feels right, whether we're comfortable with it. And I think it's fair to say, any racing vet who can look at a horse and not, let me try and express this properly, we can look at a horse and we know whether it feels right or not. And that feeling is a bit that I think David's picking up on there. The public are exactly the same. Now we're in a position where we can then follow up on that horse, and we do. So we'll know the trainer, we'll know the jockey, we'll know the background, we'll have done the yard visit, all of those checks and balances we've had in place. But just bring it to a higher level. What's really encouraging for me now is that the well-being, that 5th part, that 5th domain, is so critical. Now, it's not just about injuries, preventing injuries. That's still incredibly important, and we do it every day of the week. It's not just about making sure that the stables at home on the yards are clean and well ventilated and there's good veterinary care. It's about how those horses are feeling and looking. And whether we're doing it on track or off track, that's what brings us together as the racing people. And I think we've just got to tell people what we do and how we do it and how much we care about it. And Jamie picked up on that. It's the investigating, it's the following through, it's the not walking on by. That's the critical bit. Now, I'm not saying that's something we've ever done, But I think we need to tell people that we've never done that. We don't walk on by. We will follow on whichever jurisdiction you're in. Now, again, Jamie's right. There's a difference in level as to how each jurisdiction can do that. But by having these guidelines now, we have something there that we can wave in front of our administrators or whoever's holding the budget, whatever it might be that we need to do to make it happen. And I think that's where the regulatory veterinarians have a strong role to play, and the people who work with us.
Lynn, I just wanted to come back to what I mentioned to you just a few moments ago about being the current chair of the International Group of Specialist Racing Veterinarians, which obviously has contributed to the IFHA minimum horse welfare standards through the group's welfare guidelines. So it'd be great if you could provide us with a bit of background as to the membership and role of the group and the part its members have played in the safeguarding of the welfare of racehorses.
Yeah, sure. We're a global organisation. We've got an increasing membership. We're up to about 170 at the moment across all continents. And as I mentioned earlier, we're largely vets employed by racing authorities, but increasingly experts, colleagues who work alongside us, who can assist in the work and help drive it forward. So epidemiologists, virologists, experts in their field who can help us do our work. I guess we've actually recently been reviewing our usual thing, our vision, our mission, our strategic plan. We think that we're offering colleagues the opportunity to support and be supported by like-minded people, committed to safeguarding and improving horse and greyhound health welfare. And we have to put in the sports integrity part as well. We're all about the integrity of the sport, and integrity obviously encompasses welfare. They're very closely mixed. I think traditionally people would associate integrity with security type services, but it's also the honesty of the sport as well. So that comes into it. We have three priorities: our horses, our membership, and our industry. And I guess it's fair to say whether it's an individual horse on the race course or a whole herd health challenge, we would be one of the key groups alongside the trainers, the jockeys, the vets at home who are focused on the horse. The horse is our thing. And I was thinking about how to explain it. If you ask a regulatory vet which horse has just won on a race, they may well not be able to tell you, because they're actually looking at the horses at the back of the field, making sure that they're okay, seeing what's going on there, which is probably one of the few groups that would be doing that on the day. IGSRB brings us together. We have a shared experience and knowledge. And what that does, obviously, is apart from the sort of peer-to-peer support part of it, it means that in these days of constrained budgets and really tough challenges, we can make the best of what we have. And I think that's very important. That's where we would work closely with the IFHA, with our colleagues in the field, make best use of what we have. We're very focused on education at the moment. I'll just finish on that. We are redeveloping our website in order to be able to provide education specifically for regulatory vets. And I think when I was in Bristol, going back to my undergraduate times, I wouldn't have had a clue about the role that vets can play in racing and in sport in general. And I think by allowing people to understand that better, we can make sure that the vets of the future in this area are as well equipped as they can be. I guess finally to finish, we would see that the minimum welfare standards are there to be translated into reality. Going back to this idea, it's no good just talking about this. It's got to be translated into reality. So progressing the concept in it, working with our administrators, international bodies is where we're focused now.
I think you kind of just answered my next question in your last sentence when wondering about the IFHA minimum horse welfare standards document and whether that's a static document or whether it's one that's bound for evolution.
Yeah, it's the beginning. I mean, it's a really solid beginning, and it's crystallized everything that's been done previously. But we need to work now to assist as many jurisdictions as possible, make it a reality, whilst at the same time looking ahead. So I think it'll be a sort of double track thing. It'll be making sure that we bring everybody in as far as we can, but we'll be looking over the horizon as well. Safeguarding these horses' welfare cannot stand still.
If I could just add on to something Lynn said there, there's a segment or a section within the minimum standards which is taken directly from Lynn's group, and I think one of the lost things in the racing phase and equine welfare in the racing phase is that it's actually providing for welfare for the horse post-racing. So if the horse receives proper care, proper welfare, including the 5 domains, so their mental state, if they're properly cared for during their racing career, it enhances their opportunities post-racing, and globally, again, there has been a focus on the post-racing phase of a horse's life. So whilst the IFHA and the document may at this time be slanted towards the racing phase of a horse's life, if followed, it'll certainly deliver benefits to our horses post-racing.
So, Jamie, on that subject that you were just talking about, as chairman of the IFHA Horse Welfare Committee and obviously as a racing administrator, how do you see the initiative being utilised in a practical way by racing authorities around the world? You've given one small example there about obviously post-racing and welfare after their racing days are over, for example.
Well, if we go back, I guess, to the start of the conversation, really, Rishi, these are minimum standards. We believe they're set at a level that people, no matter where they're from, will be able to understand them. We believe that they're deliverable, even for the areas or the jurisdictions that may have a greater challenge with resources, but they're still achievable. And I think if those principles are adopted and implemented, I think you will see that document continue to grow, as Lynn said, over time. So there'll be further developments, and again, people shouldn't see the minimum standards as the target. They should, in my mind, see the minimum standards as what we are going to deliver, but we're then going to seek to deliver more. And I mean, there's ample opportunities to do that. And as we become more informed and you know, we're become better educated by the likes of David, well, you know, who knows where welfare will take us. But the one thing I do know is that we do need to take it seriously, not only for the sport, but more importantly for the horses themselves. So I think that this is the first step for hopefully every racing jurisdiction to say, right, well, now we've got our principles, we know what's required, and if we deliver these, we should be in a sustainable position going forward.
Very well said. David, I'm going to let you have final thoughts on the discussion for today.
Okay. The document is a living document, and there are two reasons for that. And that is taking on board what it is now, what the science is now, or the interpretation of the science for the purposes of a welfare code or document, and because the science moves too. 30 years ago, we were talking about the 5 freedoms. We know not very many people talk about them nowadays. 30 years ago, we were only looking at negatives. We're now looking at negatives and positives. And now we're also looking at in much more detail at the interaction between people and their animals, and in this case, the equestrians and all of those surrounding them, including equine veterinarians and so on, and the animal itself. And that actually provides a framework, pardon me, that provides a framework where the approach is on what the animal is experiencing and what the people dealing with the animal are experiencing and how you can harmonize the two. And that is what the public are going to be interested in going forward, and that is where social license will help be able to be maintained if that's taken really seriously.
And Lynn, your final thoughts on what we've spoken about today?
Oh, I just would like to. I'm just very, very glad that the IFHA have taken this lead, and I think it will bring us together. GSRB will be supporting, but it's the IFHA who've driven this, and it's a great thing.
Do believe it is a great thing. I think in today's world, where we talk about not just single individual parts, we talk about a holistic well-being. It feels like this is the right thing for the sport. That it's not just about the participants in terms of the equines, but also, as David said, the equestrians as well. And therefore, it will then lend itself to assuring the public that what we're doing with regards to what Lynn was saying about integrity is the right thing. So it's a very reassuring conversation I feel that we've had today. Lynn Hillyer, thank you very much. Professor David Mellor, thank you. And Jamie Stier, thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure chatting to you all about horse welfare standards.